Hey, what's up? My name is Jonathan Fink. I'm the author of now 16 books, and I thought I would do a YouTube video called How I Wrote My First Book. Now, I've now written fictional and nonfiction books, first and third person, and the writing process is different but similar actually for each. But what I thought I would do today is start with how I wrote my first book, which was a nonfiction true life story. Now, listen, everyone has lived a life and everyone can reflect on their life and realize that you have been the main character of the story of your life. You're like the main character of the movie of your life. And all the ups and downs, the trials and tribulations, that is quintessential you. No one has lived your life but you. No one has that story to tell but you. So the first thing that I wrote was a book about my own life experiences. Now I had to live enough life to create enough compelling chapters. But the point is that eventually I got into fictional books, and I'm now going to be doing other stuff like children's books and whatever. But before I even thought about becoming a fictional author, I knew I wanted to share the story of my life, and so I became a writer about me. And of course, my wife teased me years later after I wrote, The Baseball Gods Are Real, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and I wrote The Music Gods Are Real, volumes 1, 2, and 3, and The Football Gods, and so on. And she kind of teased me, well, you might consider yourself a writer, but you're not an author. And I was really offended by that. I already had now a few books in the Cooperstown Hall of Fame for baseball and all that stuff, and I was like, well, I've been on podcasts and done interviews live on radio, and I was like, well, it's interesting that you feel that way, that someone who writes a nonfiction book might be a writer, but it's not an author. And literally 2 weeks later, the idea for the character Kevin Dempsey and my first fictional novel, The Republic Baseball League, came to me, kind of like downloaded from the universe. And we'll talk about that whole process in another video about fictional writing. But my point is this, is that everyone who has a desire to write, even before they come up with a great idea for a fictional story that's unique and compelling, there's a unique and compelling story just looking within at your own true life story. And that's what I did. And of course, my life story revolved around lots of different themes, baseball, the music industry, entrepreneurship, falling in love, parenthood, the relationship with a father and a son, mentorship, becoming a mentor, and the trials and tribulations of my career. And so the point is that that's really easy to write because at any point in your life, you could be a 13-year-old kid and you can write about the first 13 years of your life. You could be a 75-year-old man and you could write, or woman, and write about your whole life. And you might even feel there's so much material that you could put that into a series, and there's many volumes because different parts of your life were different eras. For me, I guess I kind of did a quick. I guess I did like my whole life, not my uber childhood, but like my formidable teenage years into college and adulthood. And the key thing is this: once you figure out the time frame of if you're going to start with a nonfiction book about yourself, hopefully you've learned enough lessons, or there's enough compelling stories that would make your story worth sharing for people to want to read. But the truth is, don't write your first book for others and worry about book sales. Write your story and share your truth. And if people find it, resonate with it, great. But really, you're doing this for yourself, right? And that's what I did too. I wanted to share my story, and the fact that it became a doorway to other opportunities was a blessing. But I did it because I had this angst, this need to share this story. And so the point is this: is that when you finally decide that you want to write your own book, the first thing you should do is actually create an LLC, a limited liability company. That gives you the legal rights of being a business, because you're now, I assume you'll self-publish like I did, because it's very hard to get an agent and sign with one of the major publishing companies right now. It has been for some time. So I assume you'll be an entrepreneur and do this your own way. And so I would create an LLC, which gives you all the legal protections with being a business owner, and of course the accounting benefits. You get to expense all the money you spend, all that stuff. And so you can do it really simple. You don't have to go hire a big fancy attorney. You can just go to LegalZoom.com and do it yourself. That's what I did. So the first thing I would tell you is to create an LLC. Think of the name you want to name your publishing company. It could just be your name, whatever. It could just be Jonathan Fink, whatever. I name Jonathan Fink Publishing. You can name yours XYZ. It doesn't really matter. But then once you've gotten that set up, and that takes a couple of minutes, you now have the legal framework, and then you want to start laying out your first book. And the most important thing that I would say when it comes to writing a nonfiction book or even and definitely a fictional novel is you want to not start writing the book until you know how it's going to end. Right? If you are writing books and you're going, fly by night, seat of your pants, willy nilly, you're going to lose a lot along the way, and your story might actually get, drift off into Neverland and never really achieve the mission that you wanted. What I like to do is think about the ending before I write the beginning. And that's definitely true for the fictional stuff, but it's even true for the nonfiction, because even though it's nonfiction, it's your true life story, for example, if that's what you choose to read. Right. By the way, you can write a nonfiction book about anything. When I wrote the Golf Gods Are Real, this was a research-based book. But the point is, you still want to know how this book is going to end before you write it. And so you can lay out your thoughts on a Word document. You can now I actually use my phone, and I lay down a lot of my thoughts. You even could use AI like ChatGPT, and you can talk into it and have it record your thoughts, and then you can cut and paste it into a Word document or whatever. But beginning, right, you want to write this book, you have this angst, you have this feeling, a burning desire to share this story, but it can't go on forever, because because even if it will go on forever, you still want to, you can't put out a 1,000-page book, right? So you want to know where this chapter, these group of chapters, this book is going to start and end, and then you might write another one if it's just your life story. You might write just your elementary school years or whatever you have in mind. But you want to know where it's going to end before it begins. That's critical. You want to create a legal protection with an LLC, so this way people steal your stuff, you can sue, or you want to have the benefits of being able to use accounting to use expenses to be very efficient with your money. So remember, if you spend money, if you go buy a laptop computer, that's a business expense. That should come off your taxes, because this country, thankfully, is based on free market capitalism, right? And entrepreneurship is the backbone of capitalism. And so our country's laws are structured to incentivize us to start businesses. I won't get political here, but socialism, communism, in those systems, if the government's going to take half your stuff and own it and control you, there's no motivation to build anything and start anything. And so that's the problem with those political philosophies. But I digress. What's amazing about this country in America, and hopefully wherever you're watching this, you live in a country where you're allowed to have free speech and say what you want. That's not true everywhere. So I'm blessed to live in America where we do have free speech and we have a constitution. So anyway, I'm really grateful for those things. So let me try a very important experiment, because for me, writing definitely has an intuitive component and maybe even a spiritual component. I'd ask you to close your eyes right now. Now, if you're married, think of your wedding day. If you're a college kid, think of the day of your high school graduation, or think of the first time you kissed somebody, a boy or a girl. Right now, you're seeing that image in your mind, aren't you? Right, your wedding day, the first time you kissed a boy or a girl. If I were to ask you to imagine these specific moments in time, or the happiest day of your life. Think of your happiest day of your life with your eyes closed. That vision is going to come to you, but how could it if your eyes are closed? Well, you're seeing that vision in your mind. But even more specifically, it's your third eye. Now, your third eye is a term that's used in like New Age philosophy, and of course, Vedic and Eastern philosophy. Hindus and Buddhists talk about your third eye. But from even a scientific Western philosophy, your third eye is your pineal gland, right? Your crown chakra from a yoga perspective. But in that pineal gland is how we say we have vision. When you're dreaming at night, right, you're seeing visions. That's all happening through the pineal gland. So similarly, when your eyes are closed and you're thinking about the happiest day of your life or a horrible tragedy, you're able to see it in your mind. So when if you're writing a nonfiction book about your life and you're thinking about these memories, you can do it with your eyes open or closed, but you'll start to see it in your mind. And that is exactly how I write. When I close my eyes and I think about my wedding day, or my son playing with the Dodgers in the summer where we lived, all these things, it's like I can replay them in my mind like I'm watching a movie. And that is how you can then share your story, is by writing what you're seeing in your mind. So this is a very, very powerful tool. Now, look, if you close your eyes and you can't see anything, well, then your crown chakra, your pineal gland, is blocked, and there's lots of reasons for that. Calcification through fluoride in the water, and or in the toothpaste, or the way that your eating habits. Your chakras. That's how the spirit flows through you. And if all your chakras are blocked because you don't get good sleep and you're very stressed and you're eating unhealthy, and all these things block your chakras. But as you purify, you do yoga, you exercise, you get in shape. Mind, body, spirit are all connected, and so that opens the pathway. And so a lot of times, once as you're getting in shape, as you're doing yoga, as you're meditating and praying, and potentially becoming a vegetarian or vegan or eating healthy, then the energy will flow, and so will the ideas, and then you'll be able to see more of these things in your mind. And so that is a very important concept, is being able to see the book that you're writing like a movie in your mind, and watching, reliving those moments, or watching them play out. And so then I would think of each of those moments as chapters, right? And then you can name those chapters. I typically write in chronological order. Some don't. Sometimes you'll watch movies or read books where the last, the first thing you read is really a flashback, for example. I don't write like that. I write chronologically, but I do have to see the whole story first. And then the chapters kind of fill into place. And then once you kind of create all the chapters, you might spend several weeks just like thinking about those chapters like Lego blocks, pieces of information, or even like a blockchain, pieces of data, condensed into a block on a chain. And then therefore you'll spend a lot of time, seeing how the story you want to evolve. You might be moving chapters around, and then you might spend a few weeks doing that, and I will actually keep on my phone all the chapters, and then I'm like, no, this should come first, and that. Then I'll switch it around, then I'll email it to myself, and then I'll update the master document, a Word document, which I always use. And then from there, once you have all the chapters, you know how it's going to start, you know how it's going to end. Then you get to work. You write, the preface, you write the introduction. Preface is, why you're writing this book. The introduction is a summary of what the book is about, what you're hoping to accomplish with the book. And then you get into chapter one, and you keep going. And you don't really worry about how long it's going to be, because you don't want to force anything. You want to just tell your story completely. Because the truth is, with today's day and age with ebooks, if it's a short book, you'll just charge less for it. If it becomes super long, you'll charge more. But then after the book is written, you got to think about the format, ebook, paperback, hardcover, etc. And you also have to think about who you're going to work with. You're going to use Amazon and KDP, or Ingram Spark. That'll probably be a whole nother episode that I'll put out down the road, because I've learned a lot from my experiences, and I'm still learning as I go, but we can talk about that. But once you finally, write the first manuscript, then you're going to want to continue to improve it over the next, period of time, weeks, days, months, whatever it is for you. And then you can send it off to an editor to get, a second opinion. Now, these days you can use, ChatGPT and stuff like that for editing. I've been relying on that more and more in the last couple of books. I find it very, very effective. Now, whether you use Claude or ChatGPT or what works for you, that's up to you. But it's good to do that. It's also good that once you finish the first, in second draft, you print it out and give it to a friend or family and get their honest opinion about it, get some feedback. You don't have to do that for all your projects, but it's definitely good in the beginning. And you want to make sure that there's themes running through your books. You want to make sure that everything kind of ties together like a bow on a present. That whatever however the story begins, you want to make sure that it concludes. Even if it's part of a series, you want to have that every book should have not necessarily nonfiction, but the traditional hero's journey. The typical Hollywood script is a very helpful formula where there's you establish the storyline, there's initial success, there's usually some kind of hardship or setback, then there's kind of this a phoenix ascent, rising from the ashes to kind of to new heights. And even if it's part of the series, you want the series to kind of ebb and flow, kind of like a really good Grateful Dead or Phish show, concert. So that's how I did it with me. I wrote my first book was about my true life story. I wrote about my childhood upbringing, into middle school and then high school. I wrote about my college years, and then I wrote about my life getting married. I wrote about starting my career in the music industry. I wrote about how I met John Perrin. He became my apprentice. I wrote about the whole relationship. And I did eventually write volumes 2 and 3, but that wasn't my intention at first. I kind of wrote, you want to write that first book. You don't know if there will be a second or third book, but you want to, write it as if it's a complete piece of art. And then after that, you might think about what you want to write next. But a couple of big takeaways. First, I would say definitely create an LLC, LegalZoom.com or something like that. You want to know how the book ends before you start it. Nonfiction, if it's not about you, you want to do the research. But if it's about you, it's easy. You just have to look within to find the story. The easiest book to write is the story of your life. So that is the path that I took. I started writing about myself. And then once I kind of exhausted that storyline, first through the Baseball Gods Are Real series, and then I kind of did it again with my Music Gods Are Real series. Once I kind of felt that my story was told, it was time to move on to new things. And then, look, the ideas come to me in all kinds of places. On my walk, I'm in the shower, listening to music, playing video games, watching television. A lot of times it came to me, in the past during yoga class. Sometimes I would literally keep a sticky notepad and write things down. But I would just say that your chakra system is very, very real. And if you want to think scientifically, think of that as your pineal gland, your heart, your solar plexus, and all these different the 7 chakras. Esoterically, they're all energy centers, and if they're blocked, the energy can't flow. And so, whether you're an athlete or an artist or even a corporate executive, my guess is the more open your chakras are, the more the energy flows, the more life becomes easy for you. As a writer, though, I'm guessing writer's block happens when all your chakras are kind of clogged. But the point is that intuition and creativity, I think, can flow in higher capacity when you're doing the work, when you are, every day I go to the steam room. Now these days I go to edit, but I used to go to meditate. Meditating is very, very enhanceful for creativity. Even if it's just nonfiction, true life story, new chapter ideas will come to you. Not necessarily even while you're meditating, but it could even be after that. There's some sort of cumulative effect or benefit of meditation. And by the way, meditation doesn't have to always be just sitting with your eyes closed doing deep breathing. It can be playing video games. It can be going for an hour walk every day. Whatever you're doing that gets you into kind of that zone where you're not thinking about writing, that's when the ideas come to you naturally. You can't force anything. If it's being forced out of you, it will be inauthentic. When I write where I have to feel it, and if I don't feel it, I'm not writing. A lot of times I have an on and off addiction to caffeine, because when I'm feeling it and I got a story to tell, I want to stay up all night until I'm done with that thought, and I'll drink coffee or soda or eat candy. I used to stay up all night, whatever it takes to get those thoughts out. And here I am 16 books later, I still get the thoughts. But Joe Bonzo, I interviewed in the Music God series. He was the tenor singer for the famous Oak Ridge Boys country group, and he talked about creativity. Like creativity is like a faucet, and like a faucet with water on a sink, and sometimes it just trickles out, and you don't get much out of that. Maybe you get a song or two, or even just a few lyrics. Sometimes it's like almost like it's broken after you opened it, and it just keeps pouring out. And that's the blessed state as an author, where the creativity is just constantly coming to you. You'll be driving in the car and you'll see a sign, and it'll say Silver Lake, and you'll be like, oh, that relates to something that I wanted to put in my book. You'll see another sign, and you'll say Quivira, and you'll be like, oh, that's a Bible verse. Things will happen where you become so in tune that the ideas will just flow to you in abundance. And when they're flowing to you in abundance, frankly, I don't think, I just saw a recent interview by Madonna. She was like, don't take credit for anything that you're creating. It's coming from source. It's coming from God. You're just a vehicle. Universe wants to tell this story, and you're just the vehicle of that story. And of course, your true life story, if we're all fragments of God, we all come from the one, then of course your life story is worth telling, no matter what it is. And you don't know how many people will resonate and want to read it, but that's not the point. You want to put out your story and tell your story, and let your truth flow. So I think that's a good summary for how I wrote my first book. My first book was writing about myself, which is something that anyone can do. And by the way, these days with with ChatGPT and cloud, you can be making book covers and all that stuff. So it's really easy now to take the initiative and create your first book. So that's how I wrote my first book. I encourage you to do the same. My name is Jonathan Fink. You can find my books everywhere. You guys take care. God bless.